Everybody, welcome to another episode of Yammie Noob. We're on the best beginner bike today, the H2, baby. Following behind me on the second best beginner bike is my buddy Brandon on the R6 back there.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna keep up with you today.
Yeah, see if we can keep up. Hold on, we gotta let him hear the sound of my people a little bit. It's a beautiful thing. The topic of today's video is, if I was a beginner rider again today, how would I do things? Would I do it differently? I thought I'd bring Brandon along because you have a ton of experience and you've been riding for a long time, and when you started riding, things were a little bit different. So Brandon, tell me your story of how you started riding.
It was my dad, honestly. I remember getting a motorcycle when I was 3 years old for Christmas. My dad was a racer at the time. He raced in the novice classes, and we just went to the track all the time. And it was kind of destined to be. Started racing in 2004. Started riding in 99, 2000 time, and it's been a long road. Racing for what, going my 20th year now. It's been a long road.
That's a very different set of circumstances than most people. What was your very first motorcycle? Do you even remember, or were you too young to remember what that first bike was?
No, I love that bike. It's a little Honda Z50. That thing was awesome. I remember launching it into some cactus piles sometimes. My dad having to catch me mid-air because he knew exactly what was going to happen. After that, got a TTR 90. Started doing some junior motard races and CMRA and TMGP, and just kind of grew into that. I think after that it was NSR 50, then CR 85, I believe, or 80 actually, because we couldn't afford the 85. Yeah, two-stroke. Then I got a KX 65, a little step back. Then went to an RS 80, same motor as the CR 80. Just in a GP frame, and it kind of grew from there. I think we had a debate whether I wanted to do like a 450 motard after that, or go straight to a 600 or a 250. Good thing we ended up settling on a 250, probably for the best.
Yeah, for sure.
And,
so it's interesting. So you started on little bikes just because you were literally small. Like a lot of people start on an R6 because they don't want a little bike because they're adults when they start. But you had to start on a little bike because you're literally 3 feet tall, so you can't get on a big bike.
That's all. That's all I could fit on at the time, and it was actually a really slow, methodical progression of things, and it went really well. After the 250, we went actually to a RS 125, back to the two strokes. And I love those bikes. Handle phenomenally, and they only weigh like 150 pounds. So even I can pick them up.
What's funny is I think Garrett Gerloff said the same thing about his RS 125. I think he said it was one of his favorite bikes ever.
I raced with Garrett years and years ago, and he actually had a Morowaki at the time too. We did a Morowaki Cup back in 2010, I believe it was. And it was a great time riding with all those guys. It was always close racing. Never really knew who was going to win until the last lap or so. And it was very competitive coming up at the time that I did. After the 125, we went straight to the 600s. And you kind of stopped there, honestly. I've ridden some thousands. I haven't raced any 1000s. I never felt the need to. I've been on an R6 since I was 13, or 600 class bike since I was 13.
That's crazy, honestly.
Yeah. At the time, I was the youngest kid to be approved to be able to race a 600 class bike. I think there's a couple kids below me that have superseded my number by a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was the youngest, and it was a learning curve because I never had the I call it a privilege to race in the novice class. I never had the privilege to race a 600 in a novice class. I had to race against the experts because I had already become an expert in the small bike category.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very steep learning curve for me. It was, you know, sink or swim type of thing.
Yeah.
Luckily I started swimming.
A real trial by fire. So I guess the question is, if you were to start riding today with, you know, and knowing what you know now, let's say you're 25 years old, you want to start riding motorcycles, how would you do it? What would you do?
With the available bikes today, if I had no knowledge of previous riding experience or situations or anything like that, I would honestly, I'd probably start out on an R3 or a 300 style bike, maybe a 400, and that's about it. And I would probably do the same style of progression that I did when I was a kid. I would go from a 400 to a 650 or a 650-esque bike, kind of like the R660 and the R7. I'd go to those, and then I would probably debate back and forth what bike I would go back to, whether it be a 600 or anything of that sort. But I would still try to make it a slow, methodical progression and not try to create such a steep learning curve for myself again. I would want to make that a much more gradual thing, because I've been on a lot of different bikes, a lot of endurance teams, a lot of race teams, and you never get to pick the bike. It's just, all right, cool, go ride, and you have to figure it out. So you're always putting yourself in those situations. So the more you can minimize that, I believe, the better.
So you'd still focus highly on kind of track days and racing? You'd still want to do that?
I think that's just where it would end up anyways. Knowing the kind of person that I am, I always want just a bit more. So I believe I would outgrow the street before I hit the 650 type class. I would probably still ride every once in a while on those types of bikes, but once I got to a 600, I probably wouldn't ride on the street anymore, to be honest with you. I feel like naturally I would still, if my dad never introduced me to racing, I'd still probably figure it out and end up going back anyways.
Yeah.
Bit of thrill seeker, if you will. So there's never enough type of thing. I feel like that's where it would go anyways. How did you start? I mean, I know we've met a few years ago at the track, but how did you start?
So I started in 2015, many years after you started. And the reason for that is because my dad rode motorcycles when I was not even born yet in Brazil, and he actually got into a pretty bad accident and kind of decided to stop riding, which kind of foreshadowed my own experience with motorcycles, which is kind of funny. But yeah, he kind of didn't want me to get a motorcycle, so I got one as soon as I was out on my own, financially independent, nobody can tell me anything, because he basically said, if you bring a motorcycle home while you are living under my roof, you won't have a place to live anymore. So yeah, I was 22, I bought a Yamaha R3. I decided to start on something small and something reasonable, because I knew, much like yourself, I just always want a little bit more, I always want to go a little bit faster and kind of enjoy the fast, thrill-seeking parts of bikes. And I was like, man, if I get an R6 or, God forbid, an R1 as a first bike, I will kill myself very quickly. So I decided to start on a small bike. After about 6 or 7 months on the R3 and about 15,000 miles, I decided to jump to a Daytona 675, which, if we're going to talk about what I would do differently, I would have spent a lot more time on the R3. That's, in my opinion, not enough time to jump up to a 600 to really appreciate what a 600 can do. I mean, you're on an R6 right now, and they have a lot, you know, they can do a lot. Those bikes are incredibly capable, and I was not even prepared to ride a bike like that when I started, but I made it work, you know. Infamously, I did have a couple spills and crashes and stuff, but I think it's all part of the process. One was a bit more spectacular than other people's, but I kept with it. I love motorcycles, and so I kept riding. But honestly, I would do things really differently if I could go back in time. I mentioned how I was like, yeah, well, I could keep the R3 longer and all that stuff, but really what I would do is I would get like a cheap beat-up dual sport for my first bike, I'd get like a fucking like a DRZ 400 or WR250, and that'd just be my street bike. I could bop around, take some twisties, pop some wheelies, you know, go off-road a little bit, just do whatever, learn all those basics, and then I would save up money to get a Ninja 400 or something to go on track, and then that would be my track bike, and then I'd have both kind of separated, both low displacements, both something that I could grow into and kind of learn and acclimate to. And then I would definitely get like a truck or a trailer to haul all those toys with, and then I'm set. And I'd spend all my money on gas, seat time, and tires. That's it.
Yeah. And I feel like people need to remember that the track and the street are very, very different. And I can see why people get bored of certain bikes on the street, because they feel like they've gotten to the limit of the bike. But you haven't really gotten to the limit of the bike, you've gotten to the limit of the street. There's not a whole lot you can really do within a safe type of situation to progress your skill set on the street that way. I feel like people need to remind that there's still stuff that even after all these years, I or yourself are still learning on the 400. We are not the fastest people.
Straight up, yeah.
There's always someone faster and better on a certain bike than you are, and I feel like people need to understand that. But at the same time, like I said, I understand why people believe that they've reached the limit, because that's all they've been accustomed to, is here at 70 to, if you're a little more adventurous, 100 plus miles an hour, that you feel like that's the limit, and you're like, okay, cool, well, I want to get to 100 faster, and people are like, that's why they go to 1000s. I can see the logic behind it, but when you take yourself out of that scenario, all of a sudden you realize you don't know your bike at all. You really don't.
And honestly, I mean, a lot of guys, they don't get to the track, and that's okay, but yeah, like for the stuff we're doing right now, you know, if you didn't have the experience you had, you know, I'm on this H2, the Apex Predator street bike, right, so to speak. You're on the 600. Yeah, if we were to go out and do a bunch of dumb highway pulls, you'd be like, man, I can't keep up. You know, like, I need a faster bike. But it's really... I think honestly, like, motorcycle manufacturers want you to believe that, so you buy more motorcycles, you know? Buy more expensive bikes, buy bigger bikes, and you don't need them.
And it's fair to assume that, too. The more we've been hanging out and talking street stuff, the more I realize that it's a fair assumption to think that. But again, the moment you're out of the normal scenario that you're used to, all of a sudden you don't know what to do because you don't have the experience to deal with it. And that's where people get hurt. They're like, okay, I want to go take twisty roads. Oh, I've been riding those roads for years now. But okay, cool. But then you get into just a slightly different scenario, slightly different weather, or the road isn't as clean or as grippy as it was last time. But because you've ridden it under the same conditions the whole time, you don't know what's going to happen. And that's when people get to wrecks. Because that's what I hear all the time. I've had so many of my dad's friends, and actually a few of mine, pass away in the street. If you think that there's skilled riders that have been riding for 20-something years, and they know the roads, so there shouldn't have been a reason that they would crash, because they don't have the experience. And I think the quote that comes to mind the best, I forget where it comes from. I wish I knew off the top of my head, but I think it's on the new Any Given Sunday movie. But it's, I thought I had 20 years of experience. Then I realized I had 1 year of experience 20 times.
That's right.
That speaks volumes.
Dude, yeah, for sure.
And if you don't get out to the track or put yourself in a new scenario, you very quickly fall into that category of having 1 year of experience multiple times.
Straight up. You know what's interesting too is it doesn't even have to be track experience. Like, we obviously are biased towards that because that's what we like, but you know, if you just get out of your comfort zone and you you know, ride different motorcycles and ride them on different roads, maybe you dabble a little bit in some off-road stuff, and just try to keep putting yourself in experiences where you have to be challenged with motorcycling, that's how you grow. But like you said, if you keep riding your same bike on those same roads, you're gonna plateau pretty quick, and you're just gonna be able to do that same thing over and over again. That 1 1 year of experience repeated 20 times. And that's why, you know, you'll see young kids who have been riding and racing for 3 or 4 years, and they can ride circles around the track day pros, you know?
Oh, exactly. And because they've been in a very steep learning curve the entire time. And they didn't have a chance to plateau, as you say. So whenever you put yourself in those scenarios to constantly learn, in whatever category it may be in, off-road, dual sport, track, you know, whatever it may be in, if you keep expanding your experiences, the better overall rider you'll become. And I truly believe the more settled you'll be on, okay, cool, I don't need a 1000 because I know that this 400 will do more than I am capable of giving it.
Yeah.
And again, we've been riding, I mean, I've been riding for many moons now. I don't know everything about any given bike, and on any given day, if someone offered me a certain bike to race, more than likely it would be a Mini that I would take. I would take a 400 over anything else because I know that I am not the fastest with it, and I know there's always something to learn. Even though I've done thousands upon thousands of laps of those same tracks, there's always someone better because someone figured out something to do differently and learn differently. I love going off-road and doing the same thing. I love putting myself in scenarios to challenge myself. I don't like jumping too much. Up and downs are not my friend. But I do love like trail riding and stuff like that, because especially trails that I haven't ridden on dirt bikes, you don't know what's coming up, and I try to keep up with the fast guys, and yeah, it doesn't end up well all the time. I do end up crashing and it hurts, but I won't do it again, I can tell you that. And yeah, the one scenario that I won't put myself in, I have once before, is riding street, you know, riding a certain road that someone wants to ride and they know really well, and they just want to take off and ride it hard like it is the track. I've done it once before. I got very lucky, and all I did was run off the road. I was able to come back on. I was very lucky that I didn't crash, mainly because it wasn't even my bike at the time. It was my mother's bike.
Oh,
so
man.
I know that would have been a hard time to explain. So I never put myself in that scenario again. I would still ride with those same people, but I'd be like, all right, cool, you know, where are we going, what are we doing? So that way, when I lost them, because I know I would, they knew the roads better than I did, I would go to what I perceived to be my limit on that particular set of circumstances, and I would stay there. I wouldn't push myself much further than I need to be, because the risk to reward ratio just wasn't there for me. The reward of keeping up with them was not worth the risk of me trying to keep up.
Yeah.
So
I think it takes a lot of, you know, humility and heart to kind of look at yourself and say, hey, I shouldn't be on this R6 or this R1. Like, I should get a smaller bike, or start at a smaller bike and be like, I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can. Because that's how you become a more evolved motorcyclist. And, you know, we were talking about what we would do differently in our early careers. Like, you did it the right way with racing, and you had the right, like, you know, support group around you. But yeah, for me, I would just want to get to my goal faster and more efficiently, right? Like, if you spend 2 years on an R1, you're just wasting time, really, you know, like, honestly. Like, I hate to be so blunt about it, but if you're buying an R1 and going to track days for the first time with it, you're just wasting time, because if you got a 400, you'll learn so much faster, and you'll be that cool fast guy on the 400 within a year if you really ride that bike. Whereas the R1's just going to scare the shit out of you, and you're not going to be that efficient on it.
Exactly. And I just remembered a scenario. One of our mutual friend, actually, Tyler, when he was getting onto the track, because he wanted to start learning, he wanted to start on a 1000. I told him absolutely not. He was a very logical person in the way that he wanted to see things. So I just started talking numbers to him. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I would rather learn and crash a $5,000 bike than learn and crash a $20,000 bike.
Straight up, dude.
I know at least I can't afford to buy another $20,000 bike. So why would I put myself in that scenario, especially when I'm starting out, especially then.
Where you're at the highest risk of having a yard sale on that bike, you know?
And who knows, you may not end up liking it. Now you just wasted $20,000 because that bike's not going to resell for $20,000.
Nope.
You just now wasted that money on something that you didn't like. Why not start out cheap, make sure that you like it, and then invest into it, instead of just dumping all the money for a gamble that you think is cool instead of something that you know you like.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, man. Like, that's how I would want to do it too. Yeah, just like minimize the costs, try to get as much seat time as possible, learn as much as I can, respect the craft. And yeah, I think people's egos and the marketing gets in the way. I see a lot of that in the adventure bike space. People got and buy like a freaking BMW GS 1250, and it's like, you didn't need to do all that, man. You really could have just got a normal motorcycle and just had fun with it. Yeah, just take it easy. And the same applies to sport bikes and beginner bikes and all that. Yeah, I see a lot of that with moto guys too. They get the freaking 450 and then they go and rip their arms off and they're like, oh, I don't need to be on this bike. This is insane.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, anything else you would do differently as a beginner, man?
Honestly, no. I mean, we're pretty much on the same page. Slow progression. Make sure that you know everything that you possibly can. The more informed you can possibly be as a motorcyclist, the better and safer of a person and rider you're going to be. And I feel like that's what people need to focus on, instead of, well, my friend has a 1000, I must have a 1000 so I can keep up with them.
Yep. Well, the question is also, what bike would you get?
I guess it would depend on my finances at the time, but if I had to pick any bike right now, it would honestly probably be that 300 or 400 category bike, honestly. I would stick right around there. Even though I know the 650 category is a decent place to start, maybe not the best, but I feel like I would still start there. I think that's just a good place to be, because the bikes, especially in that category, can do so many different things.
Yeah, I'd get a Busa.
Yeah. But, I'll get a Panigale. That's what I'll get.
Yeah. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Bringing back the dual vlogs. Hope you liked them. Catch you later. See ya.